We got one more game left of the 2023 season. Let's get ready for the Alamo Bowl here on Locked On Sooners.
You are Locked On Sooners, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma Sooners, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Sooner Nation? Welcome to Locked On Sooners, and thank you for making Locked On Sooners your first listen every single day. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. If you're looking for last-minute tickets for the Alamo Bowl or any other great event in your town, download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Thank you for joining us. My name is John Williams. You can follow me on Twitter at John9Williams. My buddy here is Josh Helmer. You can follow him on Twitter at JoshOnRef. You can also hear him Monday through Friday from 9 to noon on the KREF Sports app. Josh, one more game, the Alamo Bowl, Oklahoma Sooners, Arizona Wildcats, a pretty intriguing matchup. And obviously the biggest storyline for the Oklahoma Sooners is Jackson Arnold making his first career start as the Sooners quarterback.
No need to bury the lead, right? Let's just jump right into what this game is all about for Oklahoma fans. It's about Jackson Arnold. Here's your five-star prized signee, the recruit that you hoped, you wished, you waited on. Are we going to get that commitment? You got that commitment. Along the way, he becomes the Elite 11 winning quarterback, and it started out a blue chip guy. Then by the end of it, he was a five-star guy and arguably, and in some places, the top quarterback nationally. So then you get the commitment, you get the signing, and here we are however many weeks, days, months later, and it's Jackson Arnold season. We've seen a little bit from Jackson Arnold dating back to the spring games, some flashes, some excitement there. Obviously, the BYU performance, being able to quarterback the second half of that game, John, that was our first true glimpse at Jackson Arnold. But to me, even having said that, okay, that was our first true glimpse, in some ways I would make the argument this is the true debut, because here you've had months time, however many days and practices to gear up with the understanding I'm the starting quarterback for Oklahoma in this game. And it's not a trial by fire situation that you found yourself in that second half at BYU. So, okay, here we go. This is what we've been waiting on.
Yeah, he comes into this game, the starter, getting all of the first team reps, getting all of the time with the offensive coordinator in game prep, in planning, figuring out how to attack this Arizona D. He's the guy. And there's a little bit different mentality when you go from backup quarterback. Now, yes, you're going to always stay prepared, but you're not getting as many reps in practice as if you were the starting quarterback. And so it's a little bit different preparation process. It's a little bit different mental preparation as well as you go into the Alamo Bowl. That's not to say that Jackson Arnold wasn't mentally preparing each week for whatever opponent Oklahoma was going to face. But again, it's a little bit different because you're going into that game and the offensive coordinator is going into that game looking to see how they can best utilize your skill set to attack their opponent. No disrespect to Dylan Gabriel. Jackson Arnold and Dylan Gabriel have very different skill sets. Gabriel, a very, very experienced passer, someone who's very, very accurate, can throw a good ball, got really, really good, and was much better in 2023 than he was in 2022. Jackson Arnold has the tools that made him a five-star quarterback for a reason. A big arm that can get the ball down the field, a guy that's an accurate passer, and someone who's not afraid to throw to a covered wide receiver. I think it was Gentry Williams on the podcast with Caden Helms and Nick Anderson talking about how most quarterbacks, there's one throw in which, it kind of took Brent Venables by surprise, basically, that Jackson Arnold threw. And Gentry Williams is like, that's a throw that most quarterbacks aren't going to make. But Arnold threw it knowing he could throw the guy open to a spot. And I think there's going to be a big difference in what we see down the field. Now, there's going to be a big learning curve for Arnold. He's going to have things that he's going to have to improve on and work on, and it's not going to be clean throughout this first game. But there's going to be a big difference when Oklahoma does go down the field and what Jackson Arnold's able to do versus what Dylan Gabriel was able to do. Again, that's not to slight Dylan Gabriel. there are limitations. We all knew this. We all know this. It's not in any way meant to diminish what Gabriel did. It's just that there were a lot of times where receivers were having to try to come back to the ball to get it, whether it's Brendan Thompson or Andrew Anthony or Nick Anderson, whoever. You're not going to have as many of those issues with Jackson Arnold. So again, a big difference. You mentioned the Elite 11 MVP. He was the Gatorade National Player of the Year. And I think a lot of people forget this as well. He was the first commitment to Brent Venables and Oklahoma for the 2023 cycle. Josh Bates had already been committed for 2023 under Riley, stayed committed, but Jackson Arnold was that first player to commit to Venables in the 2023 class after his arrival. So this is the guy. This is the one that we've kind of been waiting for. And it's going to be really easy to get really, really high if everything goes perfect and goes great, or it could be really easy for a lot of people to go low, get really low or get down on Jackson Arnold, depending on how this performance goes. But I think what's important for everybody to think and consider is it's his first start against a pretty good Arizona team, missing a couple offensive linemen. Let's not overreact one way or the other with how this goes. You take what you can take positively, and then you see what happened maybe negatively, and you learn from that. But this is an exciting time to be an Oklahoma Sooners fan because you're seeing what could potentially be Oklahoma's next great quarterback. Again, all of the tools are there. All of the tools are there. Will he put it together and be one of those great successful quarterbacks that we've seen don that crimson and cream? That'll be the question. But again, the tools are there. I'm excited, man. I am pumped and thrilled that we get to see Jackson Arnold, take the field with that first team on the first series of the game and just see what he can do. Because in the limited opportunities that we got to see him this year, I was impressed. And I think it's okay to feel impressed and be excited and not have this like cautious optimism or even temper your enthusiasm. No, be excited. This is an exciting time.
It is. It's added a whole extra layer of excitement for Oklahoma fans in this game. You get to see what all of the hype is or isn't about. And I would agree with you. Whether he goes out there and accounts for 4 or 5 touchdowns, looks really efficient, gets the football to Nick Anderson, Stoops, Farouk, others, and just operates like somebody that's a seasoned starter, or if he goes out there, makes a couple mistakes, turns the football over, and looks like that rookie freshman quarterback making his first start, don't get too high, don't get too low about it, because ultimately at the end of the day, the 4 or 5 touchdown performance where OU wins by a couple of scores and looks like this thing's primed and totally ready for the SEC, it's not entirely ready right now. It might get there by the time we kick off next season or get through the first month of next season or beat Tennessee in Norman. But until those steps happen, just take it as step one, right? Don't make it more or less than it is. But it's exciting. It adds a big time layer of interest to this game for Oklahoma fans. And I'm excited to see how OU approaches it, John. As we have discussed over the course of this week, what does OU want to do? Are they going to truly open things up and hand this thing off, pass the torch truly to Jackson Arnold with the amount of time that he's had to prepare and giddy up for this game? Or are they going to, maybe kid gloves isn't the right phrasing, but that's what first came to mind, kid gloves this situation a little bit and lean a little bit more on the run game with Sawchuk, with Walker, with Barnes? I don't know. I'd like to, of course, see Oklahoma's makeshift offensive line move guys around and the run game looks good and Jackson Arnold's a part of it. But I'd also love to see Arnold flash that arm a little bit. I want to see what made him the 5-star signee. So I'll be curious what approach Oklahoma has with Arnold in this game. How much freedom does he truly have?
Will they Jeff Lebby it, or will they open things up and get a little aggressive? Sorry, that's an unnecessary shot at Jeff Lebby, but we saw a lot of conservative game plans from Lebby in circumstances similar to what Oklahoma is going to face in the Alamo Bowl. What do we want to see? What do we need to see from the Sooners? We'll talk more about that here on Locked On Sooners, your team every day. It is still time to get tickets to the Alamo Bowl. If you're making that trip to San Antonio, or hey, maybe you're deciding it's Thursday morning, 7 a.m. I'm watching Locked On Sooners, and I want to go to the Alamo Bowl. I got time to make the trip. I can make that drive down to San Antonio. Oh, what? Hey, look, there are tickets on Southwest where I can fly down to San Antonio today. I'm going to make the trip. We'll go to Gametime. They got the best tickets, best prices, last minute deals for you for the Alamo. There are great seats, even in the lower bowl, as low as $113 right now over at Gametime. So go check it out. Download the app wherever you get your apps, whether it's the Google Play Store or the Apple App Store. You can also go to gametime.co on your web browser as well and check out all the great last minute deals over at Gametime. Again, that's last minute tickets, lowest prices. Download the Gametime app today. Use promo code LOCKEDONCollege to get $20 off your first purchase over at Gametime. And again, thank you for making Locked On Sooners your first listen every single day. We'll be with you all off season as well. Just because the football season is finishing does not mean Locked On Sooners is going anywhere. No, we're gearing up, recruiting, softball, basketball, Oklahoma football. We'll have everything covered. We'll even get into what's going to happen in the SEC as we start to get to know our SEC brethren a little bit more on the Locked On Network as well this offseason. So make sure you're subscribed to the show wherever you get your podcasts and here on YouTube as well. So Josh, what do we need to see from Oklahoma in this game to feel encouraged about the direction of the Sooners heading into 2024?
So I think we've probably seen what we needed to see this year from Nick Anderson and Jaden Gibson, right? I'd entertain an argument that, okay, one final breakout performance from Jaden Gibson would be pretty encouraging, but Nick Anderson, definitely, okay, you feel like you have a star receiver going forward in Nick Anderson. You know what you got, right, with Jalil Farouk. So I'm not necessarily looking skill guys for Oklahoma. I mean, if I was with wide receivers, maybe a Jaquez Petaway, if he goes out and has a really nice game, would be encouraging. Running back, we spent so much time this year concerned about, well, what is going on with Oklahoma's running backs? Yep. This was supposed to be the big strength of the team, and it hasn't come into shape the way that we thought it would. But the final month of the season, Gavin Sawchuk grabbed that thing and looks like maybe, okay, the light bulb, whether it was health, whether it was the light bulb coming on, it looks like, yes, that light bulb has flicked on for Gavin Sawchuk, and you've got your star running back there. Still like what you have with Barnes when healthy. And, oh, by the way, you're bringing in a nice signing class for of running backs. So I don't know that I'm looking skill guys offensively, John. The obvious answer would be, okay, how it feels like a year ago, how is this offensive line going to hold up if we're talking offense? And we're not talking Jackson Arnold, right, which is, of course, the low-hanging fruit.
Yeah, offensive line was certainly an issue going into the Florida State Cheez-It Bowl matchup last year. And we saw some encouraging things from different guys along that offensive line, whether it was Tyler Guyton or Savion Byrd or Jacob Sexton. I mean, there were a lot of guys that performed well in that game. Well, here we are a year later, and you've got offensive line questions. You're down, three of the guys that started for a big part of your season in Guyton and Andrew Rame and Caden Green, who went off to Missouri. But you've got a Jacob Sexton who started the final 3 games at right tackle. You've got McCade Matire at right guard, and you've got Walter Rouse at left tackle. Looks like Troy Everett's going to be your starting center, a guy that's got experience. He was a starter for App State before coming over to Oklahoma, and then played a lot. I mean, as far as a rotational offensive lineman goes, played a lot of left guard, got some snaps at center at times. So I think there's an encouraging, backup plan to Andrew Rame. I mean, you cannot replace Andrew Rame's experience, but you've got a really solid option in Troy Everett to take the reins there at center. And then at left guard, I think Caleb Schaefer, another guy who had a ton of experience at Miami of Ohio, and somebody that we thought, okay, maybe could come in and grab a starting job this year, wasn't able to do so. But again, it's a guy with a lot of experience that you can put on your offensive line, at least for this game, to help solidify your offensive line. And then behind that, I mean, some really encouraging prospects in Logan Howland and Heath Ozida and Joshua Bates and Jake Taylor. I mean, some really, really intriguing players, guys that were, highly thought of by the coaching staff and Bill Beatonbow. And so it'll be I'll be curious to see, okay, do they rotate these guys in and out? Back to wide receiver, another guy I'm kind of curious to see if they get him on the field a little bit more. That's Brennan Thompson. We saw opportunities for him in the passing game. Again, we talked about how there were times where receivers had to come back for the ball. Brennan Thompson was one of those guys that just outran the ball at times. And I would love to see them get him on the field more in this game, just to open things up and really threaten and stress Arizona deep. But yeah, I don't have a ton of questions. I think tight end is still going to be a question mark no matter what happens in this game. I think we're still going to hope for the emergence of a guy like Devon Mitchell to come in as a true freshman and just take that job. Again, lofty expectation, a lofty goal, but it could happen. I mean, it's not outside the realm of possibility that dude with the talent that he has, the size that he has coming into Norman could just take the reins and be the starting tight end. But I think that's going to be a question no matter what. Defensively, man, I'm just pumped that we're going to get to see Danny Stutzman and Billy Bowman back for this game, knowing that we're going to have them for 2024. I'm so ecstatic about that. And then what more can we get from the defensive line group? Can we see more PJ Adebaware? Can we get him in an extended run to see if we can get some juice in this pass rush? That's what I want to see. I want to see them kind of take the training wheels off of PJ and R. Mason Thomas and really just add some juice to the pass rush. There were times where the pass rush looked good, but for a lot of this season, it was underwhelming. Some of that due to what the quarterbacks they were facing were doing, getting the ball out quick or throwing the ball away before the rush could get there. But there were times where those quarterbacks had a lot of time in the pocket and not much pressure. So defensive front, man, that's going to be where I have my eyes. I'm not going to overreact to it because 2 years ago when Oklahoma dominated Oregon's offensive line, albeit an offensive line that had a lot of opt-outs, a little bit different than this Arizona team. But if they can create pressure, I'll feel a little bit more encouraged by where we're heading, especially if it's a guy like, PJ Adebaware that breaks out in this game, or R. Mason Thomas that has a breakout performance that really sets the tone for where they're headed in 2024.
And perhaps 25, right? I mean, one of the young guys that could be a significant player, a starter and significant player for next season, and perhaps even beyond that, if you're talking about an R. Mason Thomas or a PJ Adebaware. So I'm with you. Those two names, obviously, a Grayson Halton, even a couple of the guys that came back. If you got a nice final performance from a Lacey or a Dejon Terry, would not be the worst thing. I know that would be kind of counter to what we're talking about here, but I think about the decisions of those two, and then of course Stutzman and Bowman, as you mentioned. I mean, is it out of the realm of, look, generally speaking anymore, a bowl game is about what happens with the young guys, right? And I sort of took an opposite approach offensively. Feel like we know what we've got in Nick Anderson, and I feel the same way about Danny Stutzman or Billy Bowman, but it would be nice to end the season with those guys looking like stars. Like, okay, so these are the guys that made the decisions to come back. A couple of All-Americans. Show me that one final time. I'll be curious to watch what happens around Danny Stutzman at linebacker. Jaron Kanik is listed as your Mike atop the depth chart. Kobe McKenzie, Kip Lewis, those two guys, are they going to get serious run in this game for Oklahoma? Is it still Jaron Kanik's job there? What does all of that look like? So not necessarily something I need to see, John, but something I want to see. I mean, what is that going to look like for Oklahoma? I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a fair thing to be watching. I think cornerback is also going to be interesting too. I want to see Gentry Williams get through a whole game completely healthy. He's been dinged up all year, been dealing with stuff, going to play in this one, it seems like. But I just want to see him get through it, man. Like, he's a really, really, really good player, and he's one of Oklahoma's best defenders when he's out there. So I want to see him, go into the offseason on a high note, not, play half of a quarter and then have to sit the rest of the game because he's banged up again. I know he's been dealing with the shoulder thing all year and fighting through it, and the dude is tough and more power to him. But I want to see him have that success going out the door so that he has something that he can build on going into the SEC, because he's going to be one of your better players that you're going to need him to continue to ascend going into 2024. We got final keys to the game. We'll give you our score predictions as well here on Locked On Sooners after the break.
Today's episode brought to us by FanDuel Sportsbook. Check them out online, FanDuel.com/LockedOn, where right now, if you've been thinking about joining, no better time. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets. That's with any winning $5 moneyline bet. So just pick against the Kansas City Chiefs, $5 moneyline bet, and $150 probably coming your way the way things have been going lately. So as the weather gets colder, the NFL offers, they stay hot on FanDuel. And again, they've got spreads, player props, over-unders, and so much more. FanDuel.com/LockedOn, where you can enjoy this NFL season in style as we come down the home stretch. Real quick, the number for Oklahoma as we get set to boot this thing off. It is still Arizona, favored by 1.5. The money line, if you like some Jackson Arnold value, plus 100 for Oklahoma there on the money line. But FanDuel, that is the sports book you need to head to. FanDuel, an official partner of the NFL.
All right, Josh, give me a key offensively for the Oklahoma Sooners to have success against Arizona.
Don't feel the need to do too much. Don't be Superman. And we heard Seth Luttrell talking about this in his first public remarks the other day that, look, we've got a lot of talented people around us. It's my first. It's Jackson Arnold's first start. And so we're both in that together. And yet I've got Nick Anderson. I've got Drake Stoops. I've got Sawchuk. I've got Walker. I've got Barnes. I've got a lot of weaponry around me. I've got Farouk. And just trust that I can get it to these guys, do what the play is called for. First read, not there. Okay, go to a second read. Don't make panic decisions. Don't try to bite off more than you can chew in one play if you don't have to. Trust your playmakers around you to do what you've done in practice.
Yeah, it's so key. I mean, so much of a young guy that's ready to go out there and prove himself is going to be geared up, gassed up to go and make a big play. But just go make the play. Just go make the next play that's there for you to make. I think what's going to be key for Oklahoma is just keeping Jackson Arnold upright. We saw last year, Dylan Gabriel was under a ton of pressure against Florida State. Now, that was a Florida State team that has a future top 5 pick in Jared Verse on it and some very, very talented defensive linemen. Arizona, they've got some good players along their defensive front as well. It's going to be a big challenge for Oklahoma's offensive line. When Jackson Arnold drops back to pass, you got to give him time. If you're not going to give him time, it's going to be really difficult for Oklahoma to make much hay down the field. So I think that's going to be the biggest battle and the biggest matchup right now for Oklahoma is their offensive line versus Arizona's defensive line and figuring out a way to keep your quarterback upright so he can get the ball down the field and use that big arm of his to make plays down the field. Defensively, man, you got to contain Noah Fafita. Like, the dude is a really good player. He's someone who's going to make plays in the passing game. Just, you can't let them make big plays. I think we're going to see a lot of more of the bend, don't break style of defense that we've seen out of Oklahoma all year, but you're going to have to come up with stops and holding to field goals. That's a win. This is an offense that averaged 34 points per game. They were really playing great football down the stretch, and it's going to be tough, man. You're going to have some really tough matchups on the outside. And if you can limit the big play and make them play in more constrained areas, once they get into the 40 and in, it's going to maybe favor you a little bit better. We've seen how good this team can be once their opponent gets on their side of the 50 or when they get into short yardage situations. So Oklahoma is going to have to continue to harness that and be really good at, okay, we might have given up several first downs on this drive, but let's rebound, let's respond, and then let's get a stop, whether it's to force a punt, a field goal, or a turnover on downs. You got to get stops in this game defensively.
Danny boy. Oh, Danny boy. That's one of the big keys. Oklahoma's defense seems to be at its best when Danny Stutzman has a couple of timely pressures. They'll blitz him. He'll get home. Maybe like at BYU, he goes and creates the game-winning turnover for you. So I just feel like that's going to loom large again for Oklahoma is how well Danny Stutzman plays in this game. I know that's sort of maybe an obvious assessment out there, but I do think for Oklahoma, John, you can look and see that the best defensive days for OU, typically coincided with Danny Stutzman playing his best football. So, look, these skill guys, they got to be special for Jackson Arnold in this game. I think that's important. You can't have with a green at the gills rookie quarterback. If Nick Anderson gets hit in stride, Nick Anderson needs to make the catch. And that's not to single Nick Anderson out individually. I'm just as a, for instance, right? I mean, guys need to be sure-handed, I feel like, is one of the big keys in this game, because it would be easy for a young quarterback to get a little bit rattled if the play is made, but then the play is not made.
Yeah, that's right. Pick up your true freshman quarterback. When the play is there, make the play. Just like he needs to make the play when the play is there, the guys around him need to make the play as well. I think, being able to contain McMillan, I mean, the dude's got great size. He's a very productive wide receiver for Arizona. How Oklahoma attacks him, or at least slows him down, will go a long way to deciding this one. They saw a player in similar stature last year against Florida State and had some difficulty, slowing down Johnny Wilson. Can they do it this week against McMillan? It's going to be a tough question, man. I think this is going to be, a pretty high scoring game. I'm not saying it's going to be a 40 something for each side kind of a game, but I do think this is, again, going to emulate a lot of what we saw in the Cheez-It Bowl last year, where an ascending Arizona team kind of matches what an ascending Florida State team did. Now it's going to be on Oklahoma to put their inexperienced quarterback in a position to go make plays and be successful and win this football game. But I do think Oklahoma is going to have enough firepower, enough juice offensively to keep pace with Arizona. And if we're ready to get into predictions, I'm ready to say, I think Oklahoma is going to have a little magic in this one. Jackson Arnold's going to really play really, really well. And I think the run game is going to continue to thrive like they have for much of the second half of the season. And I'm thinking it's going to be something like Oklahoma 36, Arizona 34.
I like it. I'm likewise taking Oklahoma to win this Alamo Bowl. I just think that there's going to be a little bit of a lift that Jackson Arnold's playing quarterback. I think that provides something. If you tell me that the give a rib meter is important in bowl season, and a lot of people subscribe to that theory, John, then I think Oklahoma's give a rib meter got cranked up when they found that Jackson Arnold was going to be the starting quarterback in this game. Not a slight to Dylan Gabriel, who I think provided a lot over the last 2 years for Oklahoma and was largely very, very good this season for OU. I just think that injects a little bit of enthusiasm and excitement, not just for us, but for the football offices and for the practices over in Norman and for this locker room. So I think that's going to be not a detriment. I think that's going to be a positive for Oklahoma. I do think there will be points in this game. I'm going to take Oklahoma to win 34-27.
Yeah, and I'm going to amend mine because after I said 36-34, I did a lot of math in my head, and I think that's a lot of field goals. So I'm going to say 37-34 just because it doesn't hurt my head as much to figure out how Oklahoma gets to 37 versus 36. We don't do the math here on Locked On Sooners. So 37-34, I think we're both feeling pretty good about Oklahoma's chances, but this is a really good Arizona football team, a team that Brent Venables said might be the best they've played all year. And I like that either that's just coach speak and looking ahead to your next opponent as the best opponent, or that, Arizona's better than Texas. And that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Sooners. Thanks so much for tuning in and being a part of the show. Again, subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcast. Follow Josh on Twitter at JoshOnRef, myself at John9Williams. The show is at Locked On Sooners on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, wherever you do the social media stuff. That's where we're at. So go follow us over there. But until next time, we'll have you covered with post Alamo Bowl coverage and walking you into the offseason as well. He's Josh. I'm John. Boomer Sooner.